Welcome to PSD's first Q&A. The question we get the most by far is asking us to raise and certify their own service dog. So I have a lot of veterans who call who have a dog or want to buy a dog and have us train and certify their dog. That isn't something we do. And so what I do is I aim them towards the Assistance Dogs International website. At the top of that website, there's a drop-down box, and it lists organizations that are willing to help you train your own dog. But that isn't something we do. It is a question we get many times a week. ADI accreditation is an important accreditation for any service dog organization, and Patriot Service Dogs has been working to gain membership for a couple of years. And we currently have candidate status, and we'll have somebody come and see our program in person so that we can become members, hopefully by the middle of 2022. Patriot Service Dogs teamed up with Department of Corrections in 2011, and since then our dogs have been trained and raised inside of Lowell Correctional Institution. The inmates are our main trainers, and so what we do is socialize the dogs on the outside, but we train the dogs on the inside. And we have found that inmates have a lot of time and have dedication towards the final product. And so it's been a great marriage between Patriot Service Dogs and Department of Corrections, and I just can't imagine doing this program without the inmates now. We have inmates who are part of the WOOF program, sometimes for a short period of time, maybe just a year or two, but other inmates have served a great deal of time with us, almost their entire sentence. So we have some people who have been with us for 6 years, 8 years, and they gain a lot of skills as dog trainers. And a few years ago, the state of Florida and Department of Corrections came together and made certifications. So depending on the amount of hours that you spent in the WOOF program, you get different levels of certification. And people have used those to work in the dog industry once they leave. And it's a great way to kind of soften the blow of having a felony. You have a felony, but you also have this certification saying you did something with your time. Any dog can actually be trained to be a service dog. We use dogs that are about wheelchair height, so that while we're teaching them the commands of retrieval and such, they're at the right height. And we use a lot of golden retrievers and Labrador retrievers because retriever is in their name. So you can help a dog figure out how to retrieve items, but it's really easy when it's kind of what they've done for generations and generations. We also know the health lineage of the dogs that we get from breeders. We ask 3 generations back for hips, eyes, and elbows so that we know that the dog that we're putting the time and the money into has the best chance of making it as a service dog. Our weekend raisers are the people who socialize our dogs. Our dogs can be trained very well in prison, but they need the socialization that they get from our weekend raisers. So some of our weekend raisers literally have the dog for a weekend. The dog goes out on a Thursday and goes back into prison on a Monday, while other weekend raisers have the dogs more long-term. Certainly when we get closer to placing the dogs, when they're going to graduate, we get the dogs out of prison full-time. And then we have weekend raisers who may have the dog for 3 or 4 months, but they provide the time taking the dog into a grocery store and to Lowe's and all of the things that the dogs are going to be doing once they're placed as a service dog that we cannot mimic in prison. The process to become a weekend raiser, you fill out an application which can be found on our website, so patriotservicedogs.org, and there's a drop-down box, and you fill out the application and mail it to me, and then we have somebody do a home visit and a phone call, and then you must attend a couple of our meetings. Those are usually in the villages, and then we will give you a dog. We usually start with a more seasoned dog, not a puppy, and then you talk to other raisers. We have a mentor system where raisers who have been weekend raisers for a while are there in case you need help. It can be a scary process to take a dog into a restaurant for the first time and get those kind of questions that you do. So we offer someone to go with you and kind of be a buddy system so that you're more confident when you take the dog the first time. One of the important things to know about being a weekend raiser is you don't get to pick the dog. And if you like one specific dog, that doesn't mean you'll get that same dog the next time. We really like to rotate the dogs because everyone has different things that they do. We go to different grocery stores and we worship at different places, and some people go to a lot of outside sports games while other people like to walk with neighbors, and all those experiences come together to make a well-rounded service dog. So you don't get to say I'd like that cute little golden and say nope to the next one. You kind of come in and accept what we give you and make that work for the weekend. So we don't allow you to pick. And you don't get to say, I'm only going to work with this one particular dog. Yes, so some dogs aren't suited for prison, and maybe it's too hot in prison, or maybe they just don't do well in the environment. And then we're looking for people who will take the dog and raise the dog long term. It is a bigger commitment than just weekends. You have to go to training classes. You actually go into prison and train with the inmates some. But we do have some dogs that it just isn't a conducive environment for them to learn. And so they come out for long-term training. So there's always that option. It doesn't often happen, but when it does, it's wonderful to have someone who has said, I'm willing to take a dog until it graduates. We have an application for veterans, and that also is on the website, and they fill that out, they mail it to us, and it gives very concrete information about who they are and what their needs are. Our next step is a phone call. So when we get the application, we make a phone call, we go over everything, and then we do an in-home visit when possible. And we meet you, we meet your family, we see your house, and make sure that everything that's on the application is correct and also important. So you may not see the fact that you use a cane as important. Maybe the most important thing to you is that you have PTSD. But the fact that you use a cane is also important to us. We want a dog that can do both things, help you with your PTSD, but also walk very gently or retrieve items because you walk with a cane. So that one-on-one is very helpful. And we do not place dogs in the order that we receive applications. We look at the applications, we look at the dogs that will be graduating, and we match what the dog does well with the veterans' needs. So we have to meet a lot of veterans and then place the dogs in the way that they're most beneficial and can provide the most independence for a veteran. Once a match has been made so that we have found a dog that we think will be perfect for the veteran, they get our client manual. And they get that a couple months before. It gives them all of the commands. It also gives them the history of Patriot Service Dogs. If they're going to be walking around with one of our dogs and our dog has a Patriot Service Dog patch, they will be asked questions. So we want them to know the answers. And then we do some Zoom meetings where we go over the different commands, why we use them, when we use them, how we use them. And then they come for 8 days of training. And we put them at a hotel and we feed them. And the entire week, we are working to help the veteran understand what the dog already knows. So the dog is used to cues being given in a certain way, and we explain that to the veteran. So it is not a week of training for the dog. We've had 2 years of training the dog. It is a week of training for the veteran so that they understand what the dog already knows. The idea of a service dog is very different than the reality of a service dog. So having a dog in your house, you may have dreamt about it and thought this would be so beneficial and it would give me back some independence. But a dog has needs just like people have needs. So you have to take time in your day to walk the dog, to feed the dog. When you go somewhere, you're packing almost a diaper bag for the dog. So there are challenges that veterans have. It's not as simple as here's this dog, it's going to make your life perfect. It's here's this dog, together you guys are going to make a perfect team. But there is a lot of work. The other thing is many of our veterans, those who have PTSD or military sexual trauma, may not look like somebody that people think should have a service dog. They don't see what you need a service dog for. So you get asked a lot of questions, and that can be uncomfortable for a lot of veterans, for a lot of people. And so we go through that. We talk about that during training, about what you can expect. And sometimes during training, they get those questions. So there is a learning process. Dogs have hair and dogs need baths, and all of that kind of stuff needs to be thought about when you think about getting a service dog in your house. $5,000 is what our puppy sponsorships currently cost. And it, like many things, there has to go up as expenses go up. So right now it's $5,000. It will be moved to $7,500 shortly. And it's because the cost of everything has gone up. And in that sponsorship is all the costs of the dog, but also the training of the dog and the transporting of the dog and all the things that goes into making a service dog. The dogs don't magically appear in prison and then magically go to the vet. There are people doing those things, and so our costs have to include that. So it is costs like food and flea treatments and eye exams and hip x-rays. All of that goes into it, but it's also the supplies that are needed for the inmates to complete this training. So there's a lot that goes into it. We do our best to keep those costs down because we want sponsors to be really proud of what they've done and it to be something that lots of groups can afford. But we also have to consider that our expenses go up, and we want to be able to provide the dog what the dog needs as those expenses increase. With a sponsorship, you get to name the dog. That doesn't mean you can't just throw out a name and we say, absolutely, that one works. And let me give you an example. So a lot of people have picked Camo. It's an adorable name, super military. It would be great. But camo is a word that is very, very similar to no. And we don't want the dog's name, which should be a positive, to be attached closely to a reprimand like no. So camo is a name that we get asked a lot, and it's not something that we can do. We also don't repeat names because the medical records and when a dog flies and all of the things that goes into keeping a track of our dogs, we can't have two of the same name. So that becomes an issue. People say, oh, I've been wanting this whole time to name a dog Liberty. Well, we have had Liberty and Liberty Bell. That name is used. So we no longer use names that we've already used. But once the dog is here and we have a name, you get updates on what that dog is doing. So the inmates write updates for the sponsors, and it tells not only the weight of the dog and how tall the dog is, but also what they're learning at that point. So sometimes it will say, we were really having a hard time getting that dog to do a down stay last month, and this month they're doing it fantastic even at a distance. So it's a nice way to keep the sponsors up to date on what the dog is doing. And it's also a nice way for the inmates to share the success that they're having with the dog. So sponsors, one of the things they say is that communication has made a real difference, and it's an ongoing thing. So you don't just give us the money at the beginning and then you don't hear from us until graduation. There's at least every other month you get an update on what your puppy is doing. Patriot Service Dogs wants anyone who wants to be involved. We want to find a way for you to be involved. There are all kinds of ways to be involved. There's weekend raisers, there's help during training, there's transportation people who go out of town to pick up a puppy and bring it back. We want you to be a part of this group if you want to be. I promise if you become a part of this group, you will be enriched. Your life will be enriched by being a part of this group, being associated with the inmates and the veterans and the dogs. It is a win-win-win, I think, for all of us. Thank you for your questions. We hope to do more of these in the future.